Hey, if you are a fan of Led Zeppelin, this video is for you. So, Gary, as you know, the movie Becoming Led Zeppelin still out in theaters.
Yeah, IMAX.
And we're doing a lot of extra Zeppelin stuff simply because there's so many people talking about Led Zeppelin right now. And I made a video after I saw the movie the first time. I made a video where I went in and I talked about a bunch of the quotes that I had that I thought were interesting in the movie. I was, keeping track of things that they were saying, and it was some of these things that
I thought you did a great job doing.
Well, I appreciate that.
You're very welcome.
No, it was, but
not just to stroke your ego, or anything like that. Honestly, I did watch that. And I'm like, because I haven't seen it, and I'm thinking, I wonder what he thought about it. So instead of going and asking you, I just kind of watched the video.
There you go. Yeah. So there's another video that we published already that goes through what I thought were some of the key moments of the interviews. Because in this movie, they have a lot of concert footage. And the movie is worth seeing just for the live experiences, to see it in a theater.
Sure.
Because they actually have a few things where they do the entire song. And it's worth it if you're a Led Zeppelin fan. You should just go see it just for that reason. Don't worry about any of the rest of it. Just that alone is worth going to see that stuff on a big screen. Yeah. That's it. I mean, it's really important just for that reason. So, and we'll talk more about that in a second, because I picked this article because they mention a couple of interesting things in here that I wanted to tie back to that. So this is actually from the Tampa Tribune, March 22nd, 1969, and it's in the Teen Topics.
Well, I mean, think about it. Like, I know that sounds funny, but in 1969, I think when this came out, I was 2 days old, right? Because I was born on the 15th of '69, and this came out the 13th, right? And
you were born on January what?
15th.
So yeah, the album had been out for 2 days.
2 days, right?
Led Zeppelin, Gary.
Yeah. Not
come into the world at God was like, here you go, world.
Yeah, 2 big deals kind of coming out, I guess. I don't know. Don't take myself that seriously.
That's funny.
But I mean, of course it's going to be in Teen Topics because it's the new cutting edge music, right? Yeah.
It's what the kids are listening to.
Right. Here's what the kids are listening to today. Right. Led Zeppelin.
But part of the reason I love these things so much is because an article like this could not exist today for Led Zeppelin. And that's what's so cool about it, is we're looking at Led Zeppelin at the moment, like when they were the hottest thing for the kids, and this was the only thing that was out. They don't have because when we discovered Led Zeppelin, it was over. Now it's all in the history books, and we're reading the history. We didn't experience it as a teen topic.
No,
it was way over.
Yeah,
by then.
At 2 days old, no, I was not. Yeah. Or I would have been 2 months old when this article was written.
Yeah, and I was still a couple of months away from showing up. But yeah. So okay.
And I mean, so we're reading an article that's 56 or so. Almost 56 years old, which is the debut.
Yeah.
How awesome.
It's so fun.
I'm interested to see what it says.
It's so fun reading these things just for that reason. Okay.
Because it's a fresh take.
It's
a fresh take in 1969.
Almost 60 years later. Okay, here we go. Let's see. Out of all the tripe and junk music which is coming out, one album that is destined to become a major seller in 1969 is Led Zeppelin, by a group of the same name. It stars 4 young Englishmen who may take up where Cream left off.
Okay, that's interesting.
That is, it's such an interesting thing because they were a big deal.
Yeah.
And then they just kind of called it.
Yeah.
And so, yeah. And so then.
Which Cream, right? It's Jack Bruce, Eric Clapton, Ginger Baker.
Yeah.
Trifecta of just bluesy, awesome rock.
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
Right? Sunshine of Your Love, all that, heavy riffs, really cool.
Tales of Brave Ulysses. It's like one of my favorites. Yeah, White Room. Yeah, I mean, they were awesome.
Yeah.
I love that stuff. So, okay. A Zeppelin, of course, is a blimp. What an appropriate cover their initial LP has. The famous photograph of the Hindenburg blimp exploding very dramatically in the air, releasing a gaseous, fiery mixture into the atmosphere. Kind of like when Gary came into the world.
No, not. I don't know. Maybe.
This will serve as a fairly good metaphor for Led Zeppelin's album. A gaseous and fiery mixture of hard and heavy, light and sensual, and frantic and fast. Those are great descriptions of what this ended up being.
Well written. Although Hindenburg, we're not making light of the tragedy that happened there. I mean, of course, right? People died, I think, in the Hindenburg disaster.
Yeah, and
I remember seeing that in like grade school. Like
today, it's a little bit like the Titanic.
Yeah,
there's nobody around that was there at the time anymore, and it's something that's this distant memory. And yet it's this epic moment,
right?
That still resonates. And then they took that picture, and then, as it says here, there's symbolism in taking that.
I think that's kind of cool.
Yeah. Okay. Led Zeppelin's father group was the Yardbirds, with only one remaining member, guitarist and leader Jimmy Page. Page was the third lead guitarist the Yardbirds had, and their last, the first two being Eric Clapton and Jeff Beck. Speaking of Eric Clapton. When the Yardbirds finally split, Page founded Led Zeppelin, but it was not long before he changed the name of the group, something which he wasn't going to do at first. And and they ended up having to go fulfill a few concert dates as the Yardbirds. I mean, the guys in Led Zeppelin. And so
it wasn't like the new Yardbirds,
I think that was the idea. It's the new Yardbirds, and then they ended up coming up with this name Led Zeppelin. And one of the things in the movie, and wasn't like it was a secret or anything, but the name was like, what? John Paul Jones says, I was like, there's no way we're going to use this name, but I can't think of anything better. And isn't it great that they ended up using that? It just makes it that much more awesome. Bassist and organist John Paul Jones formerly worked as an arranger who has a lot of Donovan's recent hits to his credit. The rest of the group is Robert Plant, lead singer and harmonica, and John Bonham, drummer. If you have to compare Led Zeppelin to another group, it would have to be Cream, but other influences show. Jimi Hendrix, Yardbirds, Big Brother, Bee Gees, and Simon and Garfunkel influences can be heard, but not with scorn. It's no longer a crime to be eclectic. As a matter of fact, it would be a pretty hard thing not to be. What were you going to say?
I was just saying, Bee Gees and Simon and Garfunkel? I mean, I don't hear that.
Yeah,
this album's not... I mean...
But the Bee Gees also were not
I'm
the
not
Bee
talking
Gees.
Saturday Night Fever.
They were not the Saturday Night Fever Bee Gees. They were a very different
and this
band
is also... Yeah, okay. I
but
still
I get
don't
your
see
point.
that, but...
They were... the Cream in comparison is probably more like it. But really, these guys had this really heavy, out-of-the-box blues influence.
Oh, for sure. This album is very bluesy.
Because of course, Willie Dixon wrote You Shook Me and I Can't Quit You, Baby. And I'll tell you something funny. The other day, this was almost comical because I'm talking about Led Zeppelin so much, and I was going through the records looking for something, and guess what just jumped right out at me that was eye level? Willie Dixon. And I pulled it out. I'm like, I forgot I had this, and it has those songs on it. So what did I do? I listened to them, and they did. It wasn't like they just completely changed them. It was they stuck to that blues, the way Willie Dixon did it, and they did their
spin on it.
Yes, but sticking to the core of the actual song, and I did a video earlier that where I talked a little bit about the fact that when they did that first tour in America, they were opening up for Vanilla Fudge. And Vanilla Fudge did something the totally opposite of that, because they were a cover band mostly, and they were not. They were not doing it like everybody else.
Vanilla Fudge had that one that was like a remake of like a girl band song, right?
You Keep Me Hanging On, old Supremes tune,
right? Totally rework,
and it's nothing like the Supremes. But there's a video, I talk about it in one of the other videos that I did, that if you go find it, where they're on Ed Sullivan, and it is if you ever, and I said, if you ever want to know why Vanilla Fudge was popular, you need to go watch them
that video.
Do it. Yeah. And they actually, so in Becoming Led Zeppelin, they showed a little bit of that clip too, of them playing on the Ed Sullivan Show. And it's crazy because Led Zeppelin went and toured with Vanilla Fudge on that first tour. And it was just an interesting contrast because they were all about reinterpreting, like just changing it completely up. It sounds very little like the original thing, where these guys stuck to the energy of the original and then put the Led Zeppelin
spin
energy into it.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. Although Led Zeppelin is more at home doing heavy stuff, the most striking song on the album is the very forceful but tender flamenco-flavored song called Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You, which abounds in musical imagery. It is. The vocal sounds like, and I thought this was interesting, Janis Joplin. In fact, Robert Plant seems to get a lot of style from Joplin. Just as Page seems to have modeled himself after Eric Clapton. Interesting commentary. But
it really is, because, I mean, you know what? I've never heard that comparison. That's actually really pretty good, because if you listen to Robert Plant on this, and you listen to Janis Joplin, I could see like the wailing and how he's just because Janis Joplin's that kind of got that soulful wailing, you know, almost seems like she's out of control. Robert Plant does that, but even better, because he's a dude, first of all, and he's wailing like that, and the sound, and so, I mean, just on that song alone, he's fantastic. Towards the end of that, when it's just building up.
One of the things in a lot of these articles we've read, because building on what you just said, the wailing part of it, one of the things in a lot of these articles, and if you've watched our channel and you've seen the videos we've done on this early stuff the last few weeks, that is consistently said in these articles, these reviews, is that Robert Plant's voice becomes another instrument.
Yeah.
And one of the things you start to realize if you go see that movie and you see this old footage is that he is one of the greatest vampers that has ever lived. And what that is when you get to the end of a song and you're like, baby, oh, yeah, I mean,
so good.
And the thing is, when he does it, it's memorable. Okay, so I'm actually glad we got this topic, because there's a person that commented a couple days ago, and let me look. His name was Azabax80, and he was talking about how the end of Whole Lotta Love, where he's shake for me, girl, I want to be your back door man. I mean, that's the stuff where he was a master. He just starts going, and he's like, oh, hey, yeah, hey, oh, I mean, and so okay, I love this stuff so much. Because you get to the end of like Whole Lotta Love, for example.
Okay.
And usually, you know, we're getting towards the part where the song's fading out. And any time now I can take the needle off because the song is kind of over. But you don't want to miss when he starts going. That part of the song is every bit as good as the beginning of the tune, because he was a master at that stuff. Yeah. And so you get him to the end of these tunes and you watch that when you go see the Becoming Led Zeppelin, you see that early footage, because he's a lot more active too. He's like moving around, but he's just like, it's screaming all this stuff, and it's
improv, feeling it
exactly. And one of the things
in the moment, feeling the spirit, whatever it is, like
it's right, the Holy Ghost.
They're feeling all there.
It. It's so great because Jimmy Page, so often, you know, we think of him as this improv guy because he's improving so many of the solos and all that's happening right in the moment. But Robert Plant, every bit as much. And when you read these things and they're talking about him being another instrument, that's what I think they're talking about, because he is being a solo artist. He's not sticking to this map, the lyric sheet that, you know, the music's the score. He's right. He's out doing it. He's got the microphone and he's just going.
And I think you got a guy in John Paul Jones who's used to everything structured, right?
He's an arranger. Yeah. That's what he does.
So
yeah,
I'm sure
I arrange the song.
And now you bring in Robert Plant just going off. Like,
It's probably part of the magic is that you have these opposing things.
And I think that is part of the magic. I mean, we're reading a review 2 months into this, right?
Yep.
I mean, I know he mentions Robert Plant, lead vocal, harmonica, and here on the back, I just see it says lead vocal, harmonica, right?
It's probably where they got it.
Probably where they got it. But yeah, isn't that part of the magic of this album in particular? Is that you've got 4 amazing voices, dichotomous in someone that's very structured, John Paul Jones, someone that's very improv, let's just say it, Robert Plant. You got John Bonham and all his drums. I mean, just good times, bad times.
Bringing the energy into it.
It's just, you got 4 pieces that are working together.
And then you have this master producer musician. And the other, and this is so important, because the other thing you really, really get a sense of in that movie, Jimmy Page produced these things.
Right.
How in the world was he able to do this? And in the movie, you start to get a sense of this, because he had worked with, just like John Paul Jones had worked with Donovan. Mm-hmm. I mean, and this was an important thing, working with Donovan specifically, because Jimmy Page was able to actually watch. He's in the studio all the time, doing all this session work and whatever, but it wasn't that he just came in and played his guitar line and took off. It was, he was doing a little bit of this.
Yeah, what are you doing over there?
How does that, this kind of thing.
Right.
And he's learning all the ins and outs of how to record and how to get the sounds and how to get the tones and what to do and how to make sure that sounds are working together and whatever.
And again, this is 1968, 69. I mean, the album came out early 69, so they're recording in 68.
Yep.
It's not like you had 48 tracks or more.
No, it was a different world back then.
I mean, yeah.
And so you realize that experience specifically that Jimmy Page had as a session musician, without that experience, Zeppelin doesn't happen.
It certainly doesn't sound the same.
Because there'd be a producer involved. I think it doesn't happen. Because
he produced it
because he and Peter Grant went to America and said, here is the record. It's not we want an advance and we want a producer and we want people to go pay. No.
It's done.
We're done. This thing is done and it's ready to go. And if you want it, we have it. But there's no more work that's going to get done on this thing. And that's what when I say it doesn't happen, because if he didn't have that experience and wasn't able to put this album together himself, then what's going to happen if they get a record contract, which is very likely, which is very possible because of who they were. But you're going to have some sort of a producer. You're going to have somebody that's going to come in and start calling the shots.
Right.
And Jimmy Page, he talked about this so often. He had a vision for what he wanted. He had been, because of what he had done for a living, he saw so you can imagine him being in the studio working on this stuff. And the gears turning, like, you know what?
I have a vision.
That. And then he just knows where we're going to go with this thing, and this is what's going to go. And that's how we wouldn't have it without that.
And I think what's interesting is the musical landscape at the time. The article's talking about how you have Cream and some things that are kind of set the tone, but nobody did anything quite to this level. And certainly the soundscape, because I've listened to this recently, and it's just so good. So good. And it's 56 years old, man. You didn't need digital thing. I mean, but I think putting it in modern terms, one of the things about, not having albums and record labels and stuff right now, anybody can kind of put something out, kind of like Jimmy Page, and I can put it out on Spotify, and people might love it.
Yeah.
Right? But back then, to what you're saying, you got a record deal, they're bringing in their people to put out what the record company thinks the audience wants. What you're telling me, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that Jimmy Page had a vision, executed it, put it down on tape, which is what we have here, and just said, this is what you got.
Yeah.
And it's nobody... Yeah, it's done. Nobody is going to mess with the formula and the vision that I have. That, to me, is way ahead of its time.
Totally. Because and then because they had Peter Grant, then he basically becomes the blocker, the lineman.
Yeah.
In a football analogy.
This is what we're doing.
It's like, here's my guys. We're done. You want it? But you're not touching them. I'm protecting these guys.
That's interesting.
We're already done, and we're not going to have. And it's up to you. If you want it, great. But this is the finished thing.
Yeah.
So that's why I say that without that, it doesn't happen. And that time, especially with Donovan, he learned so much during that period, watching how to do this. And then, as we said a second ago, the wheels are turning.
Well, and I think that's what the movie kind of talks about is becoming. So leading up to this release, right?
Yeah. So it goes through the process of this album coming out, them coming to America, going on the tour, and while they're on tour, they're recording Led Zeppelin 2. Mm-hmm. And then, then that thing gets put out, and then the story goes through the whole thing, goes through both of these records, and then it stops there. So sorry, I didn't mean to get off on that, man, but
it's really impressive because you're right. The vision that Jimmy Page had was executed, right? With no influence from anybody else, sounds like. And at that time,
that was it.
People were telling you what you needed to be doing, right? Somebody's telling you, hey, you need to sound like this or do that.
Well, you have...
Which, they're coaching you to maximize their investment or whatever.
But here's the thing. It's easy for us to sometimes knock producers, but I look at George Martin. The Beatles wouldn't have been the Beatles without George Martin. They needed somebody like that to come in and see the vision that they wanted and help them execute it. And he ended up being a massive creative force in there.
Right.
This is different. So the Beatles wouldn't have happened without George Martin.
Right.
Led Zeppelin, as we know it, or probably, wouldn't have happened at all if it wasn't for not George Martin.
Right.
Where you have the guy inside that I know what I'm doing.
I have a vision.
The Beatles really needed somebody like that to kind of do this and say, okay, we're headed that way, to help them fulfill their vision. Jimmy Page had it. I know how to get this done. Well, the Beatles didn't have experiences in all these things that he did to get them.
Still, like when I listen to this, some of the sounds and, Dazed and Confused is on there. Is that not like just an amazing song? Yeah. There's so much. How do you... obviously Jimmy Page wrote, and the vision and the space and the energy. Some of these things, all these tracks, there's not one light track on here. These are all great.
Yeah.
Even though there are a couple covers on here. But the way they're done, man, it's epic. I'm interested to know the rest of the article and what he goes on to say.
So then it says something interesting. Page, let's see, style from Joplin, just as Page seems to have modeled himself after Eric Clapton, but he isn't as good as Clapton, although he's more than adequate. And
that's interesting.
It's in whatever.
Yeah. Probably a Cream fan.
And they're definitely not, and they're not necessarily the same style. And
again, I say he's a Cream fan, but this just came out 2 months ago. He's listening it to the first time, so I retract that. Maybe he's not. Maybe he learned to love Jimmy Page.
Yeah.
Over time.
Yeah. Again, that's what's so interesting about these things, because this person writing this has this little narrow vision.
Yeah, we've listened to this our whole life. Pretty much.
We have listened to the solo in Whole Lotta Love and know that it's like the greatest guitar solo in the history of creation. And this person hadn't heard that yet.
No, it hasn't even come out yet. Whole Lotta Love is album number 2.
We've still got a little ways before that comes out.
Right.
Okay. Led Zeppelin has been together approximately think about this. Led Zeppelin has been together approximately 3 months. But have already, which is not entirely true.
Right.
They got together in '68, but the album,
right.
But have already completed an American tour, second on the bill to Vanilla Fudge. They received no kind of noticeable recognition until they played San Francisco. Now they are exploding all over the country, and they addressed that in the movie too. So they played they came to the United States. And oh my gosh, and I talked about this in the other video, and so I won't spend much time on it, because the first show they played, Jimmy Page made some comment about how there weren't that many people in the audience, and he told the guys
nobody
in the
knows
band,
him.
Yeah, and he tells the guys in the band, let's group together and just play to each other, and it was interesting because you can see those moments where it's us against the world kind of a feeling, and groups get tighter in those moments where it's like it's just us. And Jimmy Page had the wherewithal to instead of the discouragement of it, of we don't have a big audience, that kind of thing. It's hey, everything's cool. We're just going to play to each other. And then they did. Well, then they played several other shows, and then they got to this San Francisco show. This is important. They get to the San Francisco show, and Peter Grant, and this is in the movie too, he basically says, we have to make it fly here on this show, because if you can't make this particular thing go, this is over.
Yeah.
And then in the movie, John Paul Jones, I wish I could remember what he said, but he said something along the lines of, and after that night, we had it.
Yeah.
And they knew they did. They just killed it. It was great. And then they took off from there.
Yeah. We mentioned that. It's that moment where and you turn the page and you're like, okay, we are forging the path. We have established ourselves, which, I can see there's a moment where maybe there was a little bit like, oh crap, this ain't going to fly. I mean, as with any venture, right? But you just put out an album. Is it going to be a hit, or is it going to flop?
Yeah.
Because let's tell you, there's a lot of people with visions out there, not quite as put together as Jimmy Page, and there's albums out there that, hey, I had a vision to put this music together, and it's not so good.
Oh, for every one of these, there are at least 100,000, if not 1 million, of the other.
Yeah,
so,
and that's the thing. It's like
it's a rare thing to pull this off.
So they were at San Francisco, and they finally hit it.
Yeah. So then they as they're touring across the United States, they go through the process of recording Led Zeppelin 2, and then that thing comes out later, and then
which is very different than this one.
Yeah, it is. And Jimmy Page talked about how they wanted to kind of capture the experience of playing live, of traveling and all that stuff, and grab that energy and put it on tape. And there really is something to that. The feelings and the things you're going through somehow translate down into the instrument and the scene, whatever, and they end up on that tape. Yeah, they're well, I call them kids. I say kids, and people are like, kids? I'm like, well, I don't know. My kids are all are that age. So I call them kids, and so it's normal for me to think of it that way. So yes, they were very, very young. They were kids.
Look at the pictures. So, they are young. I don't think
these could have been high school yearbook pictures. They look like that. These pictures here.
I do like it.
Yeah, it was awesome. And so interestingly, Chris Drea, I don't know if you know this, he was the bassist in the Yardbirds. And Jimmy Page wanted him originally to come play, to come be the bass player on this, but he wanted to go pursue business and other things and photography, and ended up taking the picture.
Oh, oddly.
Instead of being in the band, I just take the picture of the band.
I'm the photographer.
I'm the photographer.
So you think he's rethinking that career move? Maybe not. Maybe there's other pictures he's done that he's like, hey, this one's in the Louvre in France or something, right. I don't know.
Nothing quite like Led Zeppelin. But so anyway, I thought this was just a really interesting, as we talk about these little visions into what was happening. And when that whole Vanilla Fudge connection and playing with them and the contrast between these two groups and what they were doing, I think is pretty fascinating.
Yeah. Is that the whole article?
That's the end of it right there. And partly because this movie's out, I just think it's interesting, especially right now, because the movie really documents that time, to go read some of these things that actually were from that time.
leading up to this release. Their debut.
Yeah, so this
release.
one obviously happened just a couple of months after it was released. But the movie leads up to this release and then leads up to the release of number 2 and then a little bit after.
Right.
And it's just interesting now to go back and go, okay, well, while that movie, all that stuff's happening, this is what was...
Yeah.
Because in the movie, you actually see shots of newspaper headlines, and here's some of them.
Yeah.
This is what was actually being said. So anyway, I think it's super fascinating. So anyway, hey, thanks for taking the time to watch this video. And as always, please leave your comments. What did you think? What did you think about this little article and how it relates to the movie and what your experiences were with that? And also, please like the video. Of course, leave your comments. Follow the channel if you're not following the channel already. And anyway, thanks again for watching and commenting. Yeah. And with that, have yourself a fantastic day.